I know you're asking today, how long will it take? Somebody's asking, how long will prejudice blind the visions of men? I come to say to you this afternoon, however difficult the moment, yes, sir, however frustrating the hour, it will not be long, because truth crushed to earth will rise again. Yes, how long? Not long.
So we all know that what Martin Luther King Jr. was striving for before his untimely death has not been achieved.
I work in the archives where our standard question is, was so-and-so ever here? Martin Luther King was one of the people who, who did an astonishing amount of travel, making the cause, to let people know what the issues were, and then later on, when money was needed, to let people know. Anyway, so in 1960, he gave a sermon at Sage Chapel over at Cornell. He was brought in as a guest homilist, and he spoke about the way that his Christianity and the fight for civil rights were totally intertwined, and recommended that they be that way for everybody else.
It's a personal connection to me. Dr. King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968. At that particular time, I remember it, that particular day. I was in 8th grade, and I remember that the day that he was assassinated and all of the events that took place after his assassination. I grew up in the inner city of Chicago, and so during that particular period of time, 1968, provided me a context to be a part of a social movement towards integration and inclusion. For those of us who've had a chance to live the dream and to experience and give life to the dream, that he left a legacy for those of us who continue to live today to make a difference for those in the future.
The Martin Luther King Jr. Freedom Walkway. Well, several years ago, just real briefly, a class at Ithaca High School wanted to find a way to honor Martin Luther King Jr. here in Ithaca, and to remember and highlight his legacy. And they came up with the idea of renaming a street in his honor. That would be State Street. Aside from that, this became a much larger project, and it turned into more than just a street. But why don't we go ahead with making more of a recognition of the work of MLK, and not just MLK, but others who sort of lived and carried out some of the principles that he stood for, even here in our local people in her community. So it is about identifying the things, the places, the people in our community who made significant contributions to racial harmony, to supporting people at all levels, to just recognizing and supporting human dignity.
It was a group that got established, and our really mission, our key goal was to bring awareness of the teachings and writings of Martin Luther King to the Tompkins County community, but also to give people a glimpse of who this guy was. You know, he wasn't just this preacher, and it wasn't all about these sit-ins, it wasn't all about this nonviolent. He was a thinking, critical thinker, you know, a philosopher in my opinion, and I thought this book kind of brought that out.
It's not the only thing, but it really shows, it's his last statement, so to speak. So you can see where he has matured and is taking on the problems of the world and America's role in it. That's one of the main messages, not the only one. We should not feel overcome. Many people feel, rightly or wrong, that Ithaca tends to have a more what they call quote-unquote progressive street than many other places, right? You do have a lot of activists in this community, which I think is good, and so forth. But we should never rest on that assumption. And don't forget, ever so often something may loom up in Ithaca, some incidents of racism, and people get shocked. And I say, perhaps I hope not in an unkind way. I said, I understand why. How Ithaca? Ithaca is part of America.
In the van is Martin Luther King, who has been jailed 12 times on racial issues. Others on hand include Walter Reuther, head of the auto workers.
I could guarantee if MLK were around today in that frame of mind, there are other current issues afflicting the United States and the world that he would address.
Racial profiling has to stop, Mr. Speaker. Just because someone wears a hoodie does not make them a hoodlum.
It's the story that's ignited fierce passions across the nation.
Major developments tonight in the case of a neighborhood watch captain in Florida who shot and killed an unarmed 17-year-old.
If the FBI were to get involved, they would have to investigate, or if they wanted to prosecute, they would have to find that Zimmerman, the shooter, shot this young man because he was black.
Whose death has provoked weeks of demonstrations and massive internet petitions, and tonight, a rally in New York City.
Justice! Justice!
You know, if I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
I don't know, I just have this sense of urgency to fix the wrongs that I see happening around me, and I'm no longer comfortable with being, complacent in silence. We are headed to Free Speech Rock, which is right in front of Campus Center, to rally in support of Trayvon's death and to shed light on any other losses that anyone cares to share. It was kind of an unintentional rally. I had learned about the case, and I was getting more and more anxious about the things that were going on, the rhetoric that was surrounding it. And so I decided to start the movement as just a general solidarity stance so that people could start wearing hoodies and, get involved with the cause. And about 3 days ago, I decided that there could actually be an actual rally that we could start to get more awareness.
Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around.
I'm not sure if I can actually say that, if MLK were here, if Dr. King were here, that he'd completely agree with everything that I'm saying or everything that I'm doing. But I'd like to think at least that his legacy as it inspired programs like the MLK Scholar Program to exist, in turn inspired me and helped me to be where I am in order to do what I'm doing. People want to believe that we're small, that our individual actions don't amount to anything, and while one person does, it is really intimidating to go up against essentially a sea of oppression. If we all come together, if we all unite, then we can accomplish so much together. People always want to think on individualistic terms, but really it's about community, it's about support. It's coming together that makes change, because individuals come together and form groups, coalitions, and that's the way revolutions happen.
When we look at issues in our society, there's oftentimes when that dream looks like a nightmare because of our inability or our lack of attention to do the things that's necessary to ensure that fundamental fairness and inclusion is a value that is critically important.
It'll take time, goodness knows it'll take time, but it'll take all of us. And we hope that the next generation coming up will hear this, read it, see it, and live, that kind of unity.
Where MLK and people like him are important for any new generation, whether in Ithaca or not. He is alerting people that we each cannot just sit back and accept the status quo. We have a right to be involved in the process of social change. We have a right to speak out against injustice wherever it is. It is never too early to begin, and to hope we can therefore be a source of encouragement to future generations.